What is perfect communication? Are you a perfectionist, or you are afraid of being less than perfect when speaking? In both cases, this is the perfect episode for you. Hello and welcome to Communication Psychology and HR. My name is Gerhard. I'm a psychologist from Hamburg, Germany, living here in the Republic of Moldova in southeastern Europe. Most of us are apprehensive when having to speak up, to a certain extent, of course. The classic is public speaking is one of the most feared human enterprises, but also speaking up during a meeting, a public lecture, asking questions, picking up the phone and calling strangers, like in cold calling for sales. Most of us are focused on our own perfectionism. I want to be perfect, I want to create a good impression, or they focus on the negative and they are afraid of being less than perfect and they fear being criticized. Now, for many years I have been teaching foreign languages, more than 20 years, as a side activity. And in foreign languages, it's quite clear on the surface what perfection could mean. It could mean that I have no accent, or I have a native accent, or that I make no grammar mistakes, or that I speak fluently without too many pauses. It seems pretty straightforward, but as my foreign language students will attest, I often enter discussions even in foreign language classes about the topic of perfection because it's not so straightforward. And many of my students get annoyed with this topic, maybe you too, after listening what I am going to share. Because the main message is that there is no such thing as perfectionism or perfection in communication. Why? Because perfection would depend on you. Who are you as a person, with your personality, intentions, feelings at the moment. The other person with his or her personality, feelings and intentions at the moment, and the situation where you're meeting. And the right communication style, the perfect words, body language and so on, depends on all those three factors. So nobody can give you a general recipe how to be the perfect communicator in all situations in your professional and private life. This seems quite obvious, but for many people this is quite a shock. And especially because we are living in a time where everybody tries to live through life hacks. There are managers who try to manage by using hacks, people learning foreign languages with hacks. And of course, if we want to improve our communication, we rely on small snippets of techniques, truth, insights, and try to copy them into our daily activities. And it doesn't work like this. And why? Because everybody is different. And we ourselves are different. So it's basically the same thing like with all other kinds of tastes. We have a certain taste for communication. It's the same with musical tastes. If I played you a song and asked you how good the song is, your judgment will depend on your personal tastes, but also on the style of music I intend to publish the song. So if it's a hip-hop song, or is it for film music, or is it music to be played in a supermarket, in a commercial, is it music to get people excited before a sports event, or is it something like classical music? People need to listen to this in contemplation. It depends. And as no two people agree on all musical aspects, even within a style, if you're a fan of hard rock music, heavy metal music, you will discover that there are some bands that you like and your fellow rock or metal fans dislike. And this is with everything, with literature, with politics, with food, and it's also with taste for communication. Let's take, for example, the typical standard advice people receive on creating a good impression, a first impression. We have studies showing that the first impression is formed during the first 100 to maybe 500 milliseconds in an encounter when meeting a stranger. The question is, what is causing, what's influencing during those first 100 milliseconds? And this depends on different people. For example, there may be people who prefer less formal dress codes. They themselves want to wear comfortable clothes, so they don't care about formal clothes. But if they are going to meet their surgeon for an important operation, probably they rely on certain expectations on how a surgeon should look like, or if they go to the bank to deposit money, they probably expect also there a more formal style than in other occasions. On the other hand, if they are, for example, hard rock or heavy metal fans and they go to a concert of a new band and they are clean shaven with short hair and wearing suits and ties and sitting there on the stage with their instruments, probably this would not be a good first impression. So it depends on who you are, if it's compatible with yourself, with the other person, and with the situation. Now, this of course makes it very complicated, and that at this point probably you already start tuning out of such a talk, because what we want is we want clear answers, clear recipes, we want life hacks, but this seems to make everything more complicated. Now, my contention is that if I say it's too complicated for me, I want communication advice to be very simple, it actually shows a total disregard for the people I'm going to talk to. Because the people I'm going to talk to in my private life or personal and professional life, they are all different. And if I am too lazy to think about their perspective, their needs in the communication, and have a certain flexibility in adapting my style to their needs and expectation, and it shows that I care more for myself, which is natural as human beings. We are egotistical by nature to a certain extent. But so it means I'm willing to sacrifice the experience of my customer, of my coworker, over my personal comfort and uneasiness with ambiguity, because that's really the underlying problem. All conversations, they are not very clear. So we never know for certain what's going on in the head of another person. There's always a lot of guesswork, and that's the apprehension we feel when we are on a stage or when we pick up the phone calling some strangers, because with people we know, we can calculate more or less how they are, what they expect from us, but on a stage or on television there are potentially millions of people judging us, and we don't know what their criteria are. So if you don't care for your customers and your colleagues, then please continue listening to life hacks and use the same advice for every situation. But then you shouldn't be surprised that people prefer communicating with a computer over you, because even a computer is more adaptable than you. It's a bit aggressively said maybe on my part, but the idea is, in a world of artificial intelligence, the differentiating factor in our professional lives will be to focus on human strength. And that's a human strength, that we can feel other people, that we can be empathetic with other people. And people will always prefer human-to-human contact if the other human really behaves like a human and not following some script and trying to speak like a parrot or an old school computer that has some copy-paste messages. So of course it's a lot of work, but this will be one aspect in your professional life where you could work on. Now, how to work with this complexity, and we'll talk about in the next lessons here. But what you already can do is, then you can start making a list of different types of people you find in your personal and professional life. So, for example, maybe you start looking for different criteria. There are people who prefer you to speak faster. Others want to slow down. And there are people who want to have the essence up front. Others, they prefer social introduction, some banter before talking about business. So try to be more curious how people actually communicate. And if you cannot do this on your own, start using podcast episodes, reality TV shows, second-hand experiences to see, well, people are quite different from me, and how are they different, and how should I communicate to such a person? A last example, even the most self-evident things are not so self-evident. For example, everybody should be friendly, of course, yes, especially in the restaurant business. But there are restaurants, for example, in America there's fast food, or the restaurant is called the Dick's Last Resort, and it's of course made in a funny way, but the waiters and waitresses are rude to the customers, and there are different restaurants all around the world with this type of theme. So if you as a waiter are overly polite, you wouldn't fit the situation, and customers would leave disappointed. For example, I watched a YouTube video with a British influencer, formerly I think the strongest man on earth, like Eddie Hall, Eddie the Beast, and he went with his friends to that restaurant in America and enjoyed the experience. And his comment at the end to the owners or the managers was that yes, the rudeness factor in the British equivalent was softer in America. So it was not so rude. It could have been more rude, but the food quality was much better. So you see, sometimes people expect exactly the opposite of what you are taught. Sometimes you need to come across more spontaneous, less prepared, because people want to be sure that it's your honest answer. For example, with politicians, if you have a rehearsed answer and it comes off too fluently, people sense that it's a rehearsed answer. So sometimes as a politician, it may even be useful to pretend to be looking for an answer and to stammer a bit and to make pauses so people think you are really spontaneous. So think about everything we talked about today, and please come up with questions and comments. The next lessons will get more technical again. Bye bye.